Tonight is the Magical Readathon all-nighter and the Old School April sleepover. So my plan for this weekend is to get in as much reading as possible. G's all-nighter for Magical Readathon will be running in the same time zone for me, so that's from 2 p.m. usually I think to about 9 or 10 at night. And then Kelsey's Old School April sprints are a different time zone to me, and I think those are starting my time sort of 9 o'clock, half 9 at night. So I should be able to switch from one to the other. It does mean I won't be able to take part in all of the sleepover sprints, but hopefully I'll be able to stay up a little bit later than usual and be present for at least part of them. And since it's the weekend, I decided to just make the entire weekend a reading weekend as much as possible. So I have a couple of books in mind that I would like to start with. Audiobook wise, I am currently reading After the Fall by Edward Ashton. I think about a quarter of the way through it. I don't know that I have anything in mind today that would particularly lend itself to audiobook listening, so I might not make any progress on that one. But I have about 150 pages left of The Examiner by Janice Hallett. My plan when I turn off the camera is to finish this book because our local library is having a town hall sale this morning, and then it should be back in plenty of time to have lunch and start G-sprints. The other book that I would like to get to this weekend is Tough Guy by Reid. Of all the books currently left on my Orilium TBR, I think this one is probably the quickest read, possibly. So it seems really reasonable that I'd be able to get through this as well. After that, I don't really have any particular plans for what I'm gonna read, but I'm thinking maybe To Cage a Wild Bird, or I could continue on with my buddy read of When the Moon Hatched, unless I get anything out of the library that changes the entire TBR. So I managed to get this one finished in plenty of time. I had a great time with this book. So far, I think I've enjoyed all of the Hallett books I've read. This one isn't my favourite. It was a little bit not what I thought it would be. I took it to be in a university setting, and that the non-murdery scandal would be to do with maybe plagiarism in an exam setting. This actually is more like what I would call it's more like a vocational college setting. It's a mixed media art course, and the mystery is more to do with a student on the course being missing. And because of the way Hallett tells her stories, it's all mixed media, you are led to wonder which student is missing and if they are missing. What we see is the doodle transcripts. So doodle's meant to be like this college's internal messaging system. So we can't really ever trust that the people we're talking to or that we're hearing from are the people they say they are, or at what point someone might have went missing. We are presented the found materials, as if it's by an external examiner who's been brought in to audit the course. And at the beginning he says he thinks something has went on, he thinks a student is missing or in danger, and he gives you the transcripts of the year of the doodle sections to read through. There's lots of different little tensions happening between the students. The students are encouraged to use it exclusively so that in the event of any disputes over their grades, this can be looked back on. Obviously, there are a couple of points where they'll say things like, "Don't talk about this on here, phone me." And we can't know what happens in those moments. But you get most of it through the doodle chat, and I think that worked well. Sometimes with these kind of found footage books, it just seems unbelievable that everything is so well documented. But I think this one, it did make sense, and it really lent itself to constantly be reminding yourself that you couldn't necessarily take everything at face value. The place where this one fell down for me was, to be honest, today's section. So maybe the last 100 pages, maybe even less, maybe the last 50 pages, as it all ratchets towards the end. It got darker than I thought it would, which I liked, and it got a little bit of the ridiculousness I could go for. I was like, oh my god, I can't believe they would do that. We are off the deep end, they're fully committed, everything's escalating. But then the last section I think it just went too far. There had been enough already to explain missing person, to explain some of those unresolved little offshoot mysteries, but then that last section was just, it felt like she was just pushing it too far. She was determined to have a really dramatic ending. It veered into proper James Bond spy territory. Still, by no means a bad book, but this one has to go back to the library today, so that's what we're gonna do. We picked up over 30 books, but to be fair, not all of them were actually for us. I'll include a haul in some future video. Tough Guy was a really fun read. This is the third book in the Game Changer series, so it comes after Heated Rivalry and Game Changer itself. This follows Ryan, who I think we have heard mentioned before in the earlier books. He's quiet and actually very shy, very anxious, but he's one of the enforcers who gets into lots of fights on the ice. His love interest in this book is going back to slightly more the dynamic we had in Game Changers, where it's not a fellow hockey player. He is slightly more effeminate, more artsy than the protagonists I think we've had so far. Fabian and Ryan also do have a history together. Ryan lived with Fabian's family for a year or so when they were teenagers. I think it's called billeting. So I think it was maybe when he was training or playing for a hockey team in that area. He was sort of fostered, perhaps. The point being that these two have lived together, they have known each other when they were younger. They both, of course, had crushes on each other at the time that neither was aware of, and now in their 30s they are reconnecting as Ryan has been once again transferred and is in a new city. I really loved Ryan. Fabian I could take or leave, which is unusual for me because usually if there's a kind of artsy character, that's the one I'm more likely to enjoy reading about. I just preferred Ryan as a character. I felt that we got more of his POV. I felt that his POV felt more developed, his character felt more fleshed out, and his kind of internal issues were more compelling. Fabian's issues were more to do with the relationship itself, and I felt they were kind of convoluted or constructed purely to facilitate that third act breakup, whereas Ryan's felt more character based and felt more organic, I suppose. Without giving too many spoilers away at the moment, because I know that a lot of people will be reading this series currently, what I enjoyed about this one is that right from the start we have a character who is out. He isn't closeted the way Scott or Shane or Ilya are, and it almost has a kind of Elle Woods Like It's Hard vibe to it, where Ryan is out, he's always been out, he tells his teammates he's gay, it's never been a secret. And the reason is because he's not one of the all-star players, he's not one of the big celebrities. It just seems like no one's really noticed or cared. And when it does come up, because he is this kind of big, physically impressive guy, he's not intimidated by other people knowing. So it was a breath of fresh air to have him be willing to be out, to be able to kind of stomp any homophobic backlash he might get. But also just that idea that it's not such a big deal to him as it is to the others. And obviously, this is maybe a more idealized version of the NHL, whereas their storylines are maybe more accurate. But it was just a nice change to see Reid doing something different in this book, rather than treading the same tropes that we've seen in the first two books that are to do with public image and self-acceptance. That's not to say Ryan didn't have a lot of self-acceptance to do. He is, of our leads, the most emotionally fragile. He's got the most self-esteem issues that we've seen so far. Obviously Shane and Ilya both had their own issues, but I feel like Ryan's are more the focus of this book. Background to Ryan's character and the plot line that is to do with him accepting his current disillusionment with hockey, with in particular his role on his team, and trying to overcome his own social anxieties, his fear of flight, and just who he is as a person and what he wants from his career. That all felt more important to me than the romance. Fabian is able to come in and play a part in overcoming all of those different issues, or at least to offer Ryan a sounding board for all of those issues. but it felt like Ryan was the main character and the romance was secondary, whereas in Game Changer and Hate Rivalry, I felt like the romance was the main thing and the characters were a little more evenly balanced. Again, don't want to give too much away, but it had a different resolution than what I was expecting from the previous two books. She seemed to be wanting to try something new. I'm not entirely certain it worked for me, and although there is an epilogue in this book, which I loved because we've got some really fun cameos, I kind of almost want an epilogue to the epilogue. I want to see where Ryan ends up even further down the line, because I'm not entirely happy with where he ends up here. He is in a better place than he starts the novel, but I still feel like he's not fully doing what's right for him, standing on his own 2 feet as an independent person. But maybe there's going to be some updates later in the series, so I'll look forward to seeing any cameos from these guys as I continue with the books. It does leave me with a bit of a problem for this evening though, because I don't know what I want to read next. It's so funny because I agree with people that say that maybe Rachel Reid is not the world's greatest writer, and I feel like I'm watching her grow as an author, and that's great. There's more internal thought in this one and it's less dialogue reliant, but I'm not pulling out phrases that I think are beautifully written. And yet there's something so compelling about these books and so just bingeable and consumable, and I can immediately want to go into the next one. But I can't because I have a TBR and I don't know what I want to start next. So I don't know what I'm gonna do this evening. I am gonna go make dinner and I'm planning to stick through the evening with G's sprints and then Kelsey's. I just need to figure out what book I'm going to do that with.
Nothing will humble you faster than trying to outsmart a cat to give them medication, I swear to God.
After I finished Fall Guy yesterday, I really wasn't sure what I wanted to read next. I ended up reading a couple of chapters from When the Moon Hatched. I wasn't in the mood for it. I didn't feel like starting something new, which kind of cut down a lot of my options. So I ended up actually picking up the audiobook for After the Fall and listening to that while doing some crafty bits and pieces. Because Kelsey and G's sprints overlapped, I was able to just back and forth between them for a little bit, and then I finished off a little bit more of When the Moon Hatched for the last batch of Kelsey's sprints. After the Fall is a dystopian sci-fi novel. We are in a world where humanity has been wiped out by and large, and humans have been bred into what are called bondsmen. These are much smaller, much more docile versions of humans, and they've become something between indentured servants and pets of the aliens that now control the planet called the Greys. We're following John, the bondsman, and his owner, Martok. For the first section of the book, the name Martok kept making me think of Martok from Star Trek because I'm a big Deep Space Nine fan. But despite the fact that Greys are described as being really animalistic, powerful beasts, Martok from Star Trek was not the image to have, because our Martok is kind of a genial idiot. He reminded me a little bit more of basically any of Roger Allam's characters, but specifically the one he plays in the thick of it. And then visually, I just kept thinking of the rhinos from the animated Robin Hood. So it was a very interesting mental picture. In the book itself, Martok has come up with a get-rich-quick scheme. He is going to open an isolated retreat and have kind of a wellness centre for Greys. This is something that they don't really do. He thinks it's unique. To fund it, he takes out a loan on John's indentureship, which John is very aware that Martok is full of great plans that never work out. He is fairly confident that Martok's not going to pay it back. He essentially is going to be repossessed and he's probably going to get killed for sport. Two of them then find a second bondsman, a little girl called Six, and the book then is the three of them trying to run this retreat, trying to reclaim John's indentureship. And the plot at the back of the book makes that all sound like it's going to be really funny. It mentions it as being a buddy cop workplace comedy. And from the description, it does sound a little bit like that, but the tone of the book isn't there. Partly because John and Six end up entangled with a local human rebel faction, partly because there are a series of fuck-ups and misunderstandings where John and Six also end up convincing the other Greys that Martok has this special power that few of them have, where he's actually able to do violence to other Greys, and they set him up as what they call an enforcer by accident. And again, all of that sounds like it should have that workplace comedy vibe, but that's just not the tone the book has, which took me a little bit to get used to because of a much more dark tone, more in fitting with it just being a dystopian sci-fi. Once I got past that though, I had a great time. I'm still having a great time. I do still have the last hour to go in the audio, so I kind of feel like I should finish that today just to tick it off, but I still don't know that I have a plan to listen to audio today. Obviously my thoughts could change in that last hour, but where I am with it, I have really enjoyed the story. It's been a fun journey. It's maybe not life-changing, it's not going to be a favourite book, but I do think it's given me a nice sense of Edward Ashton's writing and his storytelling. The concept's really clever, it's really unique. I like the world building. I always say that I'm not a huge sci-fi fan, so when one works for me, it's always really noteworthy, and this one has really worked for me. At the moment, it's probably coming somewhere at a 3.5 that I would round to a 4. But we'll see how that last section goes. What, if nothing else, I already wanted to try Ashton's book Fourth Consort. It's actually already on my R Fantasy bingo. So that was a gamble when I put it there because I hadn't read this one yet. But I am confident now that I do definitely want to read that. That does put me back pretty much where I was last night though. I didn't want to start something new. I didn't know what I was in the mood for. Today I'm in a better place with that, and I think the book I'm going to pick up is one I talked about yesterday, I think. To Cage a Wild Bird. I can't remember the author's name. It's got a really, really bright red cover. I think it might be YA. And all I really know about it, other than that it's dystopian, is that it is set in a prison. It has a prison break or Running Man vibe to it with an escape attempt. I've heard that it's very fast paced, it's a very unique world. It has a high rating on Goodreads. It wasn't something I would have ever picked up probably on my own, but I had been starting to see it get hyped on Book Talk and was wavering. So then when this dystopian prompt came up, it was the perfect choice. I could be reading Matt Dinniman, I suppose, now I think about it, and I don't actually know why none of the Dungeon Crawler Carl books or Operation Bounce House occurred to me when I was looking for dystopian books. I ended up using scrolls on 2 of the 3. I could have just read those. Possibly because I want to listen to the next Carl book, which for me is The Inevitable Ruin, but I had enough audiobooks sorted for this month. I didn't think I would get through them. I have a physical copy of Operation Bounce House though, so I actually could switch those. I will let you know what I decide. So, quick update, I did try To Cage a Wild Bird and I gave it 3 chapters. I think that's maybe just over 10%. It wasn't for me. I didn't enjoy it. I wasn't compelled by the characters. And also I already had this in mind. So I did decide just to DNF To Cage a Wild Bird, which I'm quite proud of myself for that. I made a decision and I stuck to it. I wasn't having a great time. I thought I would enjoy something else better and I moved on. And I realised that that's like the bare minimum in self-awareness, but for me that's a step up. So I did pick up Operation Bounce House by Matt Dinniman. I had this really nice Waterstones edition. I don't know if you can see, but there's gloss here, there's orange foiling in the fire, sprayed edges, and like a really nice front cover with foiled lettering on it. I'm jumping in because I've hit about the halfway mark, so it feels like a good place for an update. I'm enjoying this one. It's very different from Dungeon Crawler Carl, and I have seen a lot of mixed reviews of this one. I haven't looked in depth at the mixed reviews, but I kind of saw people being like, it doesn't live up. And I think that's because it's so different. Dungeon Crawler Carl for me is something out of my comfort zone. It's the only lit RPG I've ever read. I'm not a huge gamer, so I feel like I'm liking it despite that element. Whereas I can understand that if that's what you went into it for, you maybe are connecting with that series in a different way, and so this one is a disappointment. Because although it does heavily use the idea of gaming in the plot, it's coming at it from a very different angle. In Dungeon Crawler Carl, we are in the game. We are immersed in the game mechanics and the gameplay, and that's a really big part of the series. In this, the game is more a plot device that is happening to our characters. These are farmers, colonists on a planet that has been isolated from Earth for generations. Just as their quarantine period is coming up, Operation Bounce House comes into effect. An Earth-based games company has been tasked with clearing the planet. And what they have done so that they can essentially profit from both ends is create a narrative where instead of farmers, this planet is overrun with terrorists. These terrorists are trying to destroy all Earth's hard work. They are going to create links for other systems to be able to easily access Earth, and they are dangerous. So the games company deposits mechs, big armored warrior devices, onto the planet, and then sells the rights to operate these machines to gamers on Earth, slaughtering the colonists. Our protagonist is Oliver. He, his sister, and a small group of friends, family, community are trying to resist. We have a 5-day window that supposedly that Operation Bounce House will be taking place on, and the book is divided up into day 1 of 5, day 2 of 5. So in theory they just have to make it through the 5 days, but knowing the capitalist games companies, knowing the way Dinniman writes politics, I'll be very surprised if everything sticks to that timeline. It also has some unique formatting in it. We also have transcripts of film that Oliver's girlfriend is recording in the kind of pre-Operation Bounce House timeline. So we get to see snippets of their past. We get to see them explain some things about how the colony has been built over the years. I'm really enjoying it. It's not as out there in terms of what we see from the game, from the world, as Carl. We have our new Sonarians, we have the gamers from Earth, and we have an AI called Roger, who is kind of leading and organising Oliver and his friends. We don't have all the whimsical and ridiculous and balls to the wall NPCs that we get in Dungeon Crawler Carl. The fights are much more, we have these type of guns, they have these type of weapons, we are facing off, rather than all the really crazy quirky battle mechanics that we get to see in different Carl books. It's more straightforward. I also think it doesn't have the same humour. There's a couple of funny moments, but I would say that this is more just dystopian sci-fi. It's not aiming for that really wild type of satire and type of comedy that is prevalent in the Carl series. So I think the two things are so distinct, it's unfair to compare them. Operation Bounce House was a lot of fun. I don't know that I have that much to say that I didn't cover at the halfway point, but the second half of the book, the action really does amp up. The video game element does become more prevalent. We do have a sense of being inside a video game a little bit more, not so much as any of the Carl books, but there's a little bit more of the idea of what it might be like to be in one of these kind of first-person shooter games. And the pacing really barrels through this last section, which makes sense. We've had almost a under siege setting at the beginning. The pacing is rather slow. We get lots of moments with these characters, as well as obviously those flashbacks giving us even more into their history and the relationship dynamics. And then this last section really hits the final conflict, the big battle moment, and I was really impressed by how well it came together. There were little references to things mentioned in passing at the beginning of the book that became relevant to how they pull off the finale. I thought there were some really smart choices and some really brave choices in terms of storytelling, but I can see why overall this might be a hard book to love, especially in that last couple of chapters, the last few revelations, the tying up of all the loose ends. Yeah, Oliver and his friends are the protagonists. They are the ones we've been rooting for. But the finale of the book twists things around a little. They're still the good guys, but the AI, Roger, and the games company, Apex, become a little more muddied in that finale moment. It took away clarity we had had up to now of who our villains were, who our good guys were. It gave probably a more realistic and more grayscale picture of the universe and make you wonder who you really wanted to succeed in a conflict going past this book in the future. And I like that this was a standalone. I feel like Oliver and his friends' story has been told in this book. Yes, I could see this being expanded into a bigger galaxy spanning conflict through Roger and Apex and what is going to happen on Earth next, but I don't think it would tie in as well to this book as to be a direct sequel. Maybe there will be a sequel, but I feel like I'm happy with this. So the other question is how this compares to Dungeon Crawler Carl, because that's what it's going up against in a sense. I think it's harsh that this book is going to be so compared to the author's bigger work, but it just is the nature of the beast. Coming out of this, I'm not as invested in this book as I am in Dungeon Crawler Carl. I definitely think I would pick that as a favourite as opposed to this, but I have to remember that I personally am on book 6 of the Carl series. I've recently read the Eye of the Bedlam Bride and only have That Inevitable Ruin to read before I can read the newest release. So I'm 6 books in, and the last couple have been big books. There has been a lot of character work, a lot of time spent in these events, in this world, and with those people. This is not that, it's a standalone. So realistically, and being completely fair, you'd only be comparing this to Dungeon Crawler Carl, the first book. And honestly, while the series as a whole has become one of my favourite series, it did take me a while to get to books that I was rating 4.5, 5 stars. I actually think if you're purely talking on the first book in that series versus this as a standalone, I actually think I prefer this one. First Carl book is great fun, and as so many people say, it does feel almost like the introductory level to a video game, and that's the point. It works in the context of that story and in that series and what it's going to go on to do. But as a story in its own right, it is a little bit more piecemeal. Characters are still finding their feet, whereas I actually think this stood up better. So the series as a whole, I prefer to this, but like for like, I think I might prefer this to the first Carl book. So with that kind of radical moment of self-discovery, I have pretty much, I think, finished my magical readathon-ing for the weekend. The 2 p.m. to 2 p.m. window is completely finished, and since we're just kind of going into the evening stretch, late afternoon, instead of continuing to read because I'm feeling a little bit burnt out, is switch over to more of the old school April activities. I'm gonna look up a couple of films and pick one, maybe a couple of TV episodes. I really hope that you've enjoyed spending this weekend with me. If you've got to this stage, either let me know what you think of any of the books or leave me some kind of school related emoji in the comments. Let me know how you're getting on with Orilium if you're taking part, and I really hope that I'm going to see you in future videos. Goodbye.